Hello there, how's it going? Ash here. It's been a while, hasn't it? I do apologise. I just get bogged down with all the footage of these videos and I just never have time to edit them. So I thought I'd just get back on it. So this is the Airborne Trooper. Just a little proviso here. Because I am so lax in editing my videos, a lot of the methods that you see here are kind of old and out of date because I've just sort of got better at them since, I guess. So bear that in mind, and I will bring it up if I've changed my techniques or anything, so we'll go from there. So this is the Airborne Trooper as seen for the first time in Revenge of the Sith. I've printed it in 3 parts. 3D prints and never come out perfectly smooth, and if you get little bits of stray filament or it's just not printed correctly, you need to just go around and prep it. You don't need to, it just helps everything at a later stage. So I always say the more prep you do, the cleaner your helmet's going to be and the easier your job down the line is going to be. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going round and getting rid of any stray bits of filament, any weird bits of support material that have just sort of melted to the print. As I said, my techniques in building helmets have improved, but also my 3D printing knowledge and skills has improved. So, you know, just things like air gaps between supports and stuff. This was a very early helmet, so there's going to be just jagged bits of filament and support material stuck to the print. So I'm just going around it with a file there just to get rid of it. You don't need to do that if it's a clean print. There will still be sharp edges and stray bits, so just go around with it with some 60 grit sandpaper just to get rid of the loose bits. It's the kind of thing that makes sense as and when you do it, you know what I mean? So this is unfortunately a really dodgy print, so a customer will never receive something like this, but I don't like waste. So, you know, if I've spent a couple of days printing a whole front of a helmet, I don't just throw it away if it's dodge. I'll try and fix it in some way. So we'll get to that bit. All I'm doing here is I don't print supports for the dome of the helmet, so there's a bit of stray filament as mentioned earlier, and you can just use a hot air gun just to melt that into place. Now if you noticed, the bottom of the front part of the helmet, you can see all that grid pattern and it has basically no wall there, so I thought I would fill this with milliput. Milliput is a really cool product. It's a 2-part kind of epoxy putty that you mix together. It's the consistency of plasticine, and then it dries rock hard. If you see me heating it up with a heat gun, it's because my workshop is very cold and this is probably winter, and you know, I'm just giving myself a helping hand. So mix that all together, and then once it's all equally mixed, I'm just sort of rolling it into a worm off camera there, and then just laying it into the helmet. So basically I'm creating its own wall. The reason I'm showing you this, rather than being embarrassed about a dodgy print, I just thought I'd show you, techniques to fix things, because they might come handy down the line if you know about these sort of methods and products. So there you go, we'll leave that to cure. It'll take a few hours. I leave it overnight usually. Right, another little tip. I'm just using a little bit of plywood here. I'm coating it in glue. Just PVA glue, and then I'm going to apply some 60 grit sandpaper. So I've got a big flat board of sandpaper basically, because this is just going to help us sand the helmet. So this is just going to take a little bit of the legwork out of sanding the edges when we come to join the helmet. If you have like a palm sander, you don't really need to do this. It's just a helpful little tip if you don't, So I sand every edge that I'm going to glue together and join. Alright, now those edges are all sanded to give us, it helps with the join, but it also gives a good key for the glue. I like to use Gorilla Glue because it's strong and it's reliable. So you want to do a dab sort of every centimetre or inch or so all the way down the helmet. If it's wider, then obviously fill the space. Smaller blobs of glue is better than one kind of big layer of glue, I find, for strength. Alright, you then want to join your 2 pieces together. In this case it's the front and the back of the helmet. Line them up reasonably well. Don't worry about the exactness at the moment. I like to use crocodile kind of clips just to help keep one side together, and then basically I join the other side using a soldering iron, and that's where I want to line up properly. Definitely spend some time getting don't obsess with it, but get it lined up fairly uniformly, because obviously when we come to smooth it, it's just going to help everything, isn't it? Once you're happy with your alignment, get a soldering iron and just go along the seams. This welds them together, and you want to go down the entire outside of the helmet like so. And then once you feel once you feel happy with the joint, you want to spin it around and do the other side of the helmet. And then if you can get to it, which we can because it doesn't have the dome on top, you want to do the inside edges, seam lines of the helmet as well. All this does is help to keep it all together whilst the glue sets, so you don't have to sit there holding it, you know? Okay, exactly the same with the dome of the helmet. I'm just kind of offsetting the glue here every centimetre or so all the way around. And then we're going to pop him on top and line him up again. Be expertly OCD careful with your alignment, front and back. And I always look down, top down as well, just to make sure it all looks good. And once you're happy, grab your soldering iron, go along the edges again. It's a little bit harder to do the inside edge once it's on, but just go around and do what you can, you know, do your best. Now this is going to show how old this footage is with the product I'm using, but this product I'm going to recommend comes in really handy, even if you're an expert builder and use completely different methods, just because of its versatility. So this is a product called Lechler Spatter Rapid 1K Stopper, and it's basically used for filling pinholes in walls, or you know, maybe even car bodies. But the reason it's so good is because you can use it to a depth of 5mm, I think it is, meaning if you put it in that seam line, the bottom is going to cure as much as the top. So yeah, really handy product. Lechler Spatter Rapid 1K Stopper. I will put product descriptions and Amazon affiliate links in the description below for everything. So I'm going to go around all the seam lines where we've joined. This has been left overnight, so it's fully cured. And yeah, the other good thing of this is the consistency is like toothpaste, but then again, I think it takes probably 6 hours to fully cure, and it dries rock hard, but it's nice and soft enough to sand basically. So you may have also noticed that the print is a completely different colour. That's because I've made a few of these. My first Airborne Trooper, I actually, it was a custom job, black with like green accents and teeth and stuff. It was really cool that this custom commission that a lovely customer, I believe in America, asked me to do for him. Then I did the proper colours, you know, the white and the orange of the 212th Division. So that's why I've just basically blended a load of footage of different helmets projects, but it's all using the exact same 3D files and the exact same DIY kit to make them. So that's why. So now here is a completely different filling method and product that I experimented with. I still use this today, but I do not use this technique, and this is why. So this is UV 3D printer resin that I have diluted down a little bit with isopropyl alcohol, and I've put it in my compressor air gun and I'm spraying it because I thought this stuff is great if I can spray it and it cures super fast, ready to sand, there's no waiting overnight. So if I can speed up my process, I was building so many helmets at this time for customers, working on Jedha Workshop and just, you know, working myself to the bone. So any technique that I found that sped up my process, I was going to try. But I think I've mentioned this in other videos, do not use this method because it is highly toxic. You know, I've got an air mask on here, so I'm not breathing it all in, but still it's really harmful to your health. At one point I had a cough and I lost my voice for honestly about 2 or 3 weeks. It was so bad, and I was like, I'm not using this ever again in this way. Also, you've noticed I'm doing this inside my workshop, so that vaporized UV resin is getting everywhere, all over my shelves, all over just other helmets, all over my equipment, and it's I regret it every day of my life because that stuff is all still covered in it because I'm stupid and I wanted to cut corners and speed things up. But having said that, learn from my mistakes. UV 3D printer resin is an amazing product to use as a filler because, like I say, once you apply it, you just shine a UV light over it that's the same UV frequency, in this case, what is it, 305 nm I think it is, and it cures. And then you just clean off the gloop with isopropyl alcohol and it's literally ready to sand there and then. So I'm not saying don't use the product, I'm just saying don't put it through an air gun and vaporize it. Ever, 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 ever. Okay? Warning, done. So because I'm dumb and I didn't know this, I am doing the exact same with the accessories, spraying it on UV resin and then curing it with a UV light. So it is 405 nm wavelength, not 305, 405. And this is just a little 6-watt lamp, and honestly it cures it in seconds. So I do recommend the product, absolutely, but wear gloves and use either a paintbrush or a sponge to apply the resin. Just don't vaporize it, and that's it. Right, once you've got all your resin on, it's literally ready to go, but it might be a bit sticky and gloopy, so you want to use isopropyl alcohol on a rag, wipe it all over, and then it is literally ready to sand. It's dry, it's rock hard, it's ready to go. That's why it's a brilliant product. So if you have a power sander, palm sander, get going with that. If not, do it by hand. I start off with 60 grit, and I don't go crazy with it. I just do it a quick once over with a 60 just to help with any high area, dodgy areas all over the helmet. Okay, so quick blast of that. I then downgrade to 120 grit sandpaper, and that's my proper sanding layer. So go to town with that. Don't concentrate on one area more than others. You know, don't lose track of what you're doing. Just go over the whole thing in 120, and if there are some sort of higher areas, yeah, you can concentrate on a bit. But what I'm saying is, you don't want to sand through it all and get rid of the layer of filler, the UV resin that you've just put on. So be mindful of it and do everything kind of logically and in order. You know, it can be quite intimidating because it's a lot to sand, and this helmet in particular is a bit of a bitch, pardon my French, because there's so much curves and lines and corners and big wide open space, and it's a relatively large helmet. So what I do is I just, in my mind, I section it off. You know, I go, right, I'm going to do this bottom left bit, and then I'm going to move to the back, and then I'm going to do the bottom right bit, and then I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to go back to it, you know, because you've got a lot of sanding ahead of you, so may as well embrace it and just turn it in. I always say this, turn it into a meditation, because it is very, very relaxing. Your mind shuts down, it calms those thoughts, and you just get to, for someone who's neurodivergent like myself, and I'm very OCD, it just works wonders for my brain. Basically, it just calms my mind right down, because I get to hyper focus. That's the word I was looking for. I get to hyper focus on something for a long period of time, and it has to be done. And you know, if this was your job and someone said do this, you'd probably be like, nah man, I'm not going to do that. But this is my job, so I have to do it. So once you embrace it rather than resent it, it really does become quite a spiritual practice. I will go that far. Yes. It's like Zen helmet building, okay? So go around the whole helmet, 120 grit sandpaper, okay? Once you've done that, you want to downgrade to 240 grit sandpaper and go over the entire helmet again. But yeah, each stage you go down, it gets easier, okay? It's not like the work gets harder. Because you're making that helmet smoother, you will literally notice it's easier to sand over. You can also use do the wet and dry method. Just dip your sandpaper in a bit of water and sand over that way. That makes it even easier. Once you've been over the whole helmet in 240, you want to downgrade to 400 grit and do the whole thing again. And again, it gets easier, but you will notice to the touch it is getting smoother and smoother and smoother. The milliputty that I used on the bottom of the helmet on the right at the beginning of the video, by the way, you'll notice it was white. It's a special version of milliput. I think there's about 4 or 5 variants. It was a special chalky white one, which is sandable, supposedly. It was very difficult to sand, but it was still sandable. So I just thought I'd update you on that. It worked absolutely fine. I got it smooth and straight, and it filled that big, horrible hole where the filament had ripped off the base of the raft, basically. So yeah, we fixed it. And once you've sanded over everything in 400 grit, you want to downgrade again to 600. A lot of people stop at 240 and just spray at that. You can do that if you want, but all I see is imperfections, and paint and lacquer and finishes, they tend to pronounce imperfections, not hide them. So you know, my friend is a car body, what they call a panel beater, and he says sand down to 600 minimum. You know, you can go up to 1,000, 2,000 if you want, but 600 minimum ready for paint. So that's my rule. I've stuck by it. I still do it today. Now we're going to jump around a bit here and use a different product. So this is called P88, and this is the first helmet that we initially did. So I just wanted to show another filling technique. So basically, this helmet has been sanded raw. It looks like I've put some sort of filler on there, but I'm not that happy with it, so I'm trying it out this. This is a proper car product, so it's a high build primer called P88, and you mix it with a little bit of paint thinners, and then pour it in your air gun. Clear up there, get my gloves on and stuff, and basically this is an alternate method to UV resin. A lot of people use high build primer, a lot of people use spray putty. I just wanted to experiment with different products and different prices and different qualities and just experiment around. So I just wanted to include this. This is not the same helmet we were just previously working on. It's the same model and kit, but for a different customer. I just wanted to include this to show an alternate method to spraying UV 3D printer resin, which is horrible and toxic and awful. This is a bit more of a healthier way to do it. Okay, so that's why I've included it. So instead of going around the whole helmet painting on with a brush or a sponge UV resin, you can stick this stuff in an air gun and just start spraying around the whole helmet. So I always start with the very bottom, and because I can get to it, if it's wet and it's on a stand, it's difficult to get to the bottom, so that's why I start with the bottom. And I don't just spray the very bottom, I spray all the bottom facing surfaces around the helmet, because again, it's easier to spray kind of down or forward than it is up. So that's why I do it this way, and I do it even with rattle cans, whether it's paint, lacquer, anything. This is always my go-to technique. I then start spraying the downwards facing surfaces or the forwards ones, whichever. Basically just, again, methodically going around, making sure I'm spraying every surface and every surface is covered. Now you can see this helmet is very, very rough. Do you know what I think this is? I think this was the Halloween special Airborne Trooper that I did, where I kind of cut the front off of it and I stuck a skull in there, and I think I did it for some sort of Halloween competition or something. I can't remember. But this helmet looks so dodgy, and like I said earlier, I don't like waste, so I'll always turn, you know, nothing into something. I think that's why I'm working on this helmet and why it looks so dodge. But again, you can use high build primer out of an air gun to spray your accessories, and much healthier. I mean, look, health is not healthy. You've still got to wear a mask and it's still quite fumey, but it's just nowhere near as like awful as vaporizing 3D resin, okay? So it's a good alternate, and if you don't own an air gun and a compressor, you can get high build primer in rattle cans. However, in my experience, I would go for a spray putty over high build primer because it's thicker, it's easier to sand, you don't have to do as many layers. The only thing is the price fluctuation on Amazon. It started out as £5, then 1 week it's 10 quid, then it's back down to 7. I think it's 12 quid at the moment. So, you know, shop around and see what's best for you. So this actually looks like a completely different helmet, different probably customer to the first two, and this ironically looks like I have indeed used spray putty on this. I can tell by the colour tone of it and the kind of soft smoothness of it. If you are new to this, yeah, spray putty is a really good way to go, but again, you need to wear a mask and it's quite fumey. My go-to method still, whenever I get an order and I need to get something smooth, I still use 3D printer resin, but I paint it on with a brush, and that's it, because to me it's just the fastest. I do 3 layers. I just, again, methodically go around a section at a time. I paint it on, I cure it, I paint it on again, I cure it, and I do 3 layers, and that's really just ready to sand to me, and very easy to sand with, and you don't have to mess about with any fumes. The price of 3D printer resin is fairly consistent. It's about, I don't know, 15 quid for a litre. I dilute it with a little bit of isopropyl, so it goes on thinner rather than gloopier. And look, this is how old this video is. I don't even have dreads. Look at my hair. What's going on there? And that scarf, I missed that scarf. I left it at some people's houses. If you can see my head bobbing down, I think I'm probably definitely listening to some kind of doom metal or something. Yeah, meditating. Anyway, yeah, there's another work in progress finish of a completely different product, spray putty. Again, I will link everything down in the description, and it'd be up to you to experiment and see what works best for you, because everybody is different. Right, so looks like I'm just blowing all the sanding dust off there with my compressor. Yep, that is spray putty. I recognise the can. And look, even out of a rattle can, I'm using the exact same technique, doing the bottom surface and all the bottom facing surfaces first. Stick it on the thing. I spray where my hand has been holding it, so all the bottom surfaces are covered. I then pick it up where it's not been sprayed and do all the downward surfaces. It's actually really important on this helmet so that you don't get overspray, you know what I mean? If you just try and spray everything forwards, you're going to miss bits, and then when you miss them, you go back to spray them up or down, and then you get overspray over the forwards facing surfaces, if that makes sense. It looks crap. So basically, I just swear by this technique. Do all the surfaces facing you at the same time, and then switch and do them again. Now, in the exact same way that you sanded the helmet, do the same with all the accessories. However, I wouldn't start with 60 grit because it's a little bit harsh, because accessories, I know I always print them at a higher quality. I print helmets at 0.3mm layer height, and I print accessories at 0.2mm layer height. If you have accessories printed in resin, it's different again, because they are much higher quality, and all you do is sort of sand the little nodes off where the support's been. So, but yeah, if it's PLA printed accessories like this and printed at 0.2, I will start sanding at 120 grit sandpaper, then I'll downgrade to 240, 400, 600. So I miss out the 60 grit basically. And again, it takes 10 minutes. Just be really methodical and careful and get them smooth. It looks like I'm going for a high build primer method on these ones, and oh look, Kanan Jarrus mask. That's not supposed to be in this video. Quick, edit. Right, so once you've got them all smooth, grab yourself some black paint. I use High Coat Matte Black. Again, they are specialist car products. They're super cool, super fast drying, super reliable and cheap, so that's why I use them. They're just high quality for a good price. Right, no matter what product or smoothing method you've used, it is once you've got it smooth, filled and sanded to your happiness, it's time to paint. So I use Montana Gold Shock White for all my kind of clones. It's called Shock White, but it's actually the tiniest bit beigeier than like bright white, if that makes sense. Don't go by the colour of this video, because I've got a yellow tungsten light bulb next to it influencing that. But yeah, Montana Gold Shock White I think is the way to go for clones. Again, it's a high quality product, it's a decent price, and it sprays on really nicely. I don't know if the nozzles for this particular paint, they feel different to the other colours in my opinion, and it feels like the nozzle is slightly diffused, so that when the paint comes out, it comes out in a fine mist, almost like a powder coat. And again, that is just a really good kind of limiter to stop you getting paint runs or getting carried away, spraying too much at once, and then your paint running. So I just do like 2 or 3 layers. I leave it to dry for 10 minutes in between, and again, I just go around all the bottom surfaces, all the top surfaces, and all the forward facing surfaces until everywhere is evenly covered, and I leave that to cure fully overnight at room temperature. Right, once you've got the base coat on, you then want to do your accents. I always look at various pictures because you don't want to sort of replicate any inaccuracies that other fans have made. I try to go by the source product as much as possible, you know, the source creation from Star Wars, but they can be a little bit hard to find sometimes. So just use any reference material you can find for the shape of any accents. You want to use some pinstripe tape, that's the green stuff there, and it's really cool because it comes in completely different widths, starting from very, very thin to thick, and I use those as my immediate masking layers. And then I just use like a bog standard low tack masking tape to fill out the edges, and when I get bored of that I use a plastic bag, mate, because what's easier and cheaper and more simple than that? So that basically everywhere that's taped and covered in a bag protects all the nice white pristine base white layer that we've done, and all the exposed areas that I've taped off there are ready for the orange. So once it's on, again, go around the edges with your finger, just make sure those lines are stuck down, because you don't want even just a little crease or a wrinkle. If you imagine when you spray the orange, it's going to go under that tape, and when you peel it off it's going to not have a clean line. You're going to get overspray or leaks or whatever. So yeah, make sure before spraying anything, double check and then double check again, you know, make it idiot proof, because I've sprayed before like and forgotten to mask the inside of the helmet and gone, oh my god, because then you have to wait for it to dry, you have to repaint it, you have to mask it again, and it's a big old mess. So double check again, triple check, and make sure all your tape is actually down and there's no holes around the other parts of the helmet exposing it, so that you get a nice clean paint job. I like to give the areas I am going to paint as well just a little bit of a light sand with 600 grit sandpaper. Don't go crazy, you don't go need to sanding over the edges of your tape, just the surfaces that you're going to paint. This just helps to give a nice key for that paint to stick to and give you a clean, even professional coat where the paint is going to adhere to it properly. So you don't have to do it, I do recommend it. Now if you're doing it clean, as in a shiny, you don't need to do this bit, you're ready to paint. But if you want to do a little bit of weathering and battle damage, scratches, this is the time to do it. So this is liquid latex. I just I pour a bit in a, you know, a rattle can lid, and I get my brush and I just go around and just try to give realistic streaks, you know, where the paint would be worn naturally on the edges, and then if I want to do any scratches or streaks across it. Less is more, absolutely, with weathering, because yeah, if you can just so easily get carried away with this, and then you spray your paint and you peel it off and you go, it doesn't necessarily look realistic. So yeah, if you are doing weathering, less is more, but obviously it completely depends on your own unique, wonderful personality. Now I'm using 94 paints here. What is the colour? This is mango orange. So this is MTN 94 paints. These are amazing colours. They come in matte colours. So many beautiful shades. Again, professional product. Good price, cost effective. And the reason you may be thinking that looks a little bit bright, but I know that I'm probably going to do a black wash and maybe some airbrushing and weather down at a later date. So the colour will actually be 1, maybe 2 tones darker. I'm also, look at this, I'm blending this with another colour. It looks like a more rust orange, and I'm spraying that from further away just to give a bit of a powdery coating to dull down the orange if it is bright. So you can always mix paints if you want. You know, always try and find the shade that you actually want, but if it's not possible, you can mix stuff. I like to do things like this because it gives different texture effects. You know, you get a sort of dappled rust within that bright orange. It completely depends on the helmet, on the colour, if I'm doing weathering, on the customer, what I think looks right at the time, if I'm experimenting with something new. That's an option if you want. Mix 2 colours together. When you peel off your paint, be slow and careful. Like, seriously. don't just rip it off like it's some kind of waxing strips. You know what I mean? I don't know if you would be familiar with waxing strips, but yeah, this is getting weird, isn't it? Anyway, just be careful when you are peeling your tape off. And look at that, nice, clean. And you know why? Because we did our prep and we checked and we double checked and we triple checked. Trust me, this step has gone wrong so many times, and it's the most exciting part, in my opinion, to reveal your paint job. And when you see that you've done it wrong and made a stupid mistake, it's so disheartening. So yeah, I'm impressed with that, but that's because of the prep that we put into it. Now, time to remove the liquid latex. So you just want to go around with your fingernail first, kind of pick the edge of it, and then rub it off with the skin of your finger. And try not to go over any edges, because you can smudge, let's say, for example, that orange paint into the white. So I try to sort of peel it off inwards, if that makes sense. Just another little OCD trick. Alrighty, and this is what he looks like. You can see there is a bit of overspill of orange paint on the inside there, so I spoke too soon, didn't I? But there you go. Because we've done the scratches with the liquid latex, it's going to look weird if you don't bed that in with some dirt and kind of accumulated grime. So that's where the airbrush comes in. Now, I am deliberately using an airbrush which is clogged. I've not cleaned it, so it's kind of splurting out. And although that's going to be annoying for any sort of professional job, for weathering, it can get some cool, really random effects. So that's why it looks like crap going on. I'm doing it deliberately, I promise. So I'm going around the edges. I usually go with a layer of brown and then black, but I'm also using a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on a rag, very diluted down, and then I'm pushing the weathering back in towards each line, if that makes sense. Sort of pushing the grime where it would be, because that gets rid of the kind of crazy muddy overspray and gives it this really cool, realistic, naturally worn kind of grime. You can use, mud splatters if you want. Also, I think I skipped out this step because I think I discovered this technique on this helmet, and I use it all the time with weathering. What I've probably missed out, and I will mention it now, is before you do this, you might want to give the whole helmet a layer of matte lacquer, because what that's going to do is protect the white paint and the orange accents from the isopropyl alcohol, which you use to smudge the airbrush paint back in on itself. That way you're not going to blend any orange into white or take the white paint off of the helmet and expose the base layer or anything. So yeah, important step, matte lacquer it, then airbrush with brown and then black, and then use isopropyl alcohol to smudge it in on itself. This, just watching these videos back, is kind of a historical discovery for me, and going, oh yeah, I remember that's what I did, and yeah, I literally invented that technique on this helmet, and it came out so well. I was so pleased with it that I now use it regularly. But obviously I probably didn't know what I was doing at the time, just kind of going, oh god, that looks like crap, but actually I quite like it, and maybe I'll just do this and will that look good, because I can always fix it, and actually it looks mint. Cool, let's do that then. So there you go, another technique. There's so many techniques in this video, isn't there? And I hope you're enjoying them. So yeah, it looks like I'm just spreading the weathering back in on itself and just giving little dappled kind of textured looks with the kitchen roll there, just making sure the weathering is kind of even throughout, because if you've got loads on one side or one area and not the same on the other, that's going to look weird. So you want to get a kind of balanced weathering effect. Okay, because we've cleaned a lot of the weathering off, it looks like I'm now going over the battle damage to match up with the kind of liquid latex paint chipping, just to bring it back basically so it makes sense. Why is there a paint chip going across, but there's no actual dirt within that scar, or kind of carbonized blaster scoring or scorching across the helmet? A bit of black just across a scratch helps to bring that effect. And oh look, there's an 8D8 droid head I must have been working on at the same time. This video is just full of craziness, honestly. I can't cope. It just goes to show how much crazy stuff I was working on at the same time. But anyway, that's what he looks like, all painted up, latexed and weathered to perfection. I am very happy with that job. Now it looks like I'm sealing it in with matte lacquer at the end. As mentioned before, I don't recommend this. Matte lacquers can actually react with acrylic airbrush paint, and it can go all a bit weird. But also, again, as mentioned before, with the technique of using isopropyl alcohol to spray the airbrush in and then blend it back in on itself without taking your base layer paint off. How I do it now is I will spray the matte lacquer layer before even airbrushing. So I would have done this step prior, but you know, again, I'm probably just discovering that at this time. Hopefully it doesn't react with the paint. I don't think it did. I think I probably got lucky and learned it on something else and went, what's going on? That's what's going on. Okay. So again, all techniques that I'm learning and experimenting with myself, and just trying to throw in as many tips as possible into this video. Right, now it is time to do the visor. As you can see, I already have a template cut out from before because I've made loads of these. And then I use a brow guard replacement grinder shield from Amazon. I draw around my template. Basically, let's go into this because I get so many people going, is there a visor template to models? Some of them there are, some of them there aren't, because I started doing some, and honestly, I just don't think there's a need to do it. What are you going to do? Print it out and then draw? Like, why waste your time printing it out? Do you know what I mean? Just get a bit of paper or card, stick it inside the helmet, draw your own template, and then add a centimetre extra margin all the way around it, and then you've got your template. It's simple, honestly. I think people just whinge for the sake of it. Right, so you want to cut out your visor, you want to sand the edges that you are going to use with milliput. So here we go, milliput again, and I think I mentioned before there's different variants. This is a brown one. I don't know the speciality of this. I just had it on my shelf, but yeah, again, milliput's really good and versatile, especially for this, and it's like £5. What am I doing? It looks like a mix. I'm using that last bit from the other one, and then I'm using the chalky one. It doesn't matter, we're not going to sand anything. I think I'm just literally not being wasteful. So again, if it's cold, if you live in the UK and you're experiencing the horrendously horrible, dark, gloomy, cold, wet weather at the moment, and you want to mix some milliput together, you can heat it up with a heat gun, and then it makes it easier. Once it's mixed, roll it up into a big long snake, and then get some scissors that you do not care about, and then cut it in half, and then cut those halves into threes, and then you have 6 points in which to stick your visor to. So I always leave the protective layer on until the last minute because, you know, workshops have crap all over my workbench and it's easy to get scratched. I think I've taken it off because I'm an idiot, but leave it on if you're putting it face down to do this scratchy bit. So I mentioned before, you add an extra centimetre border to your visor and then you scratch or sand that surface to give a good key for the milliput. I also sand the inside of the helmet, and I usually give it a clean these days with isopropyl alcohol. Oh, I'm doing it there as well, look. Very good, well done Ash. Just to get rid of any gloop, grease, paint, you know, we want this milliput to stick. So again, just prep your surface. I've no idea what I'm doing with the heat gun there because this stuff does not bend or melt. Yeah, no idea. Get your milliput and then stick it at all the corners of the visor at strategic points where you envisage it would need them. Then, as an extra precaution, this is what I do: get your Gorilla Glue, spray a big blob of it, and then grab a brush, again a brush that you do not care about because it will be ruined, and I paint over the milliput. So I leave the milliput to cure overnight, but before even that I paint some super glue on it just to reinforce it, make it even harder. I go around the edges of the milliput. You can't see the camera angle here because I'm obviously just in a rush and forgotten about it. But yeah, paint over your milliput with super glue around the edges, and that helps to reinforce it and make the milliput that is already rock hard even harder. Right, back to the accessories. It looks like well, it doesn't look like, I am spraying the back of them. I don't think you really need to do that because you can't really see the back of them, but alright, whatever. Efficiency and all that. Right, I like to use real mesh in my rebreathers. I do often supply a textured printable version, but I think real is always better. So this is just Windows screen, bog standard. You can get it from, you know, any hardware store. I cut it out in a circle and then I spray it silver and I let that dry. Usually you can do this within 20 minutes of painting it, you know, in room temperature. I put it on the inner rebreather part and then just slide the outer rebreather part on top. I get it sort of shaped in there, make sure it's fully covered and it's not going to pop out. I then take it off, and that's when I apply some super glue. And then I pop them back in and I push down hard so they go all the way to the end. Alright, so it's time to stick these suckers onto the helmet. So because it's all covered in paint and lacquer and it's going to be a smooth finish, again, wherever you just line up first without any glue or anything and just see where these bad boys are going to go. And then I just sand with probably 120 or 240, just where, God, I've got a cigarette in my mouth. I haven't smoked cigarettes for probably about 8 or 9 months at this stage, so that's a bit weird seeing that. Wow. Anyway, once you've sanded, blob of super glue on your accessories and then stick them to the helmet. And once you're happy with your placement, get a bit of masking tape to keep it in position overnight. Oh, look at that, I'm an absolute idiot, knocking things left, right and centre. Yeah, make sure it's not going to move and it's going to cure in the exact position that you want it. Okay, because we haven't really weathered the accessories and it's on a weathered helmet, they look all pristine, I'm going to use a chrome paint pen to just go around the very edges of the accessories so it looks like they're kind of worn down. Obviously you can paint these accessories chrome as a base layer and then do your liquid latex, but because they're smaller and more detailed, it's a little bit harder, and I tend to find that just using a chrome paint pen works wonders. Bloody wonders, mate, especially on these grills on the nose. And with that, he is finished.